I feel like this video needs to come with a little bit of context. You see, I believe that we're all a little bit of genetics and a product of our environment. And where I have been brought up here in North Yorkshire, for the most part, we can be tough as old boots, but really, deep down, we have very, very, very soft, warm hearts. Perhaps this is why Yorkshire has been the setting and the birthplace of many a famous writer. Obviously, most famously perhaps, the Bronte sisters lived, wrote and died here. Charles Dickens actually got the idea for many of his stories in this town. The idea for Ebenezer Scrooge started in Scarborough, and Charles Dickens even gave readings at a famous shop in the town. Would often visit, and he visited the very church we have here to visit Anne Bronte's final resting place. It was in Beverley Minster that Lewis Carroll saw the famous white rabbit disappear down the rabbit hole, which gave him the idea for Alice in Wonderland. It was standing on the Yorkshire coast that Daniel Defoe looked out to sea and got the idea for Robinson Crusoe of York in 1719. And in more recent years, it was this very castle here in Scarborough that was the subject of the real Game of Thrones, is what they based the TV programme on, the War of the Roses, the Yorks versus the Lancaster, or Yorkshire versus Lancashire, which in the programme translated to House Stark versus House Lannister. This was the castle, and this country of the white Yorkshire Rose is also said to be God's county. So you see, my minimalist journey, just like everybody else's, is different because we are all really on a different path. It may sound the same, but ultimately it is different because we have different things that shape our decisions, and some of us have goalposts still, while some of us are simply enjoying the journey. Let's begin. 4 years ago, I decided to share my minimalist story on this little corner of the internet. Only something I could not foresee slowly emerged. I already considered myself and my home to be reasonably minimal, but there was this sense of underlying overwhelm that I could not quite put my finger on. I considered whether decluttering more was the answer, so I decluttered, and I decluttered, and I decluttered some more, and finally, when there was barely anything left to declutter, I found clarity strewn across my 4 white walls. My minimalist journey had been a metaphor for the box my life had been in before. You see, in decluttering all my stuff, I realised I wasn't searching simply for a tidy, clean home. I was climbing out of the arena of normative living. But I'd made a huge assumption along the way. I assumed that all minimalists felt the same. I presumed from the start that for many, minimalism was also about simplicity, slowing down and living peacefully. But I soon came to recognise that sadly, some that said they were walking the same scenic path as I weren't actually there for the scenery at all. They were there for the milestone, the counting of steps, the clock watching, and looking constantly towards the finishing post. Somewhere down the road, it dawned on me, others thought I was in the same race as them, when in fact, I discarded all my stuff by the wayside to walk slower, breathe deeper, take it all in. I'd not ditched all my stuff to merely run faster. As things had gotten lighter, I'd began to pause, look inwardly, look at the language I had chosen to use in the beginning, saying I was decluttering to travel, like I'd needed a reason to justify my want of letting go of all my worldly possessions, as otherwise, surely it would have been madness. But somewhere on the trip, I discovered what I thought was truly mad, giving away our precious time, our precious hours for stuff, but more so believing we've started an alternative route that's not about the stuff, yet still making it about a conceptual equivalent of goalposts for life. So let me begin again with greater clarity to make it a little bit clearer for some about what my minimalist journey has been about for me. 4 years ago, I said I was decluttering to travel. I never set a time frame for that because this new journey I was on didn't answer to the same constraints of usual society. I was answerable to nobody and no one. So let's continue with metaphor. Suddenly, I realised I was Alice in Wonderland, and yet so many white rabbits had gotten lost in their own hole, telling me I'm late, but yet the only date for my minimalist tea party is a party all of my own. I'm the Queen of Hearts. I won't be painting the roses red. They're all white here. And there are no clocks. I decided somewhere after passing the Mad Hatter that calendars were a metric of the old world, the world I had left behind when embarking on my minimalist journey. I also comprehended I'd been talking so long to Tweedledee and Tweedledum that I'd fallen into the trap of their discourse. I kept saying, when I travel, that I hadn't grasped that this had happened already. It hadn't happened in the way that I thought it would. I hadn't flown away for a year and a day, but I'd silently and slowly become so quietly content with my day-to-day life that there was no rush. I reached a viewpoint on my path a few days ago, and I look back at my winding course over the past 4 years. In that time, I realised I'd spent 2 months in Greece, smelling the bougainvillea and listening to Eurasian wrens. I'd visited Belfast, Dublin and Cork, kissed the Blarney Stone and listened to the violin that played the last song on the Titanic. I drunk a bit too much Irish coffee in the shadows of Oscar Wilde and St Stephen's Green. I'd rode in the tracks of Grace Kelly along the tip of the south of France from Cannes, Nice and Monaco. I drank glacier water in Norway and circumnavigated Iceland walking on the top of volcanoes. I sat back and thought, if that isn't living, I don't know what is. I've come to realise it's not about the amount of time spent doing something or how much you can cram in. It's about the quality of time spent. 4 birthdays came and went throughout my time on this channel. On the 3rd, my nana's tired eyes said she had to go. This day reminded me time is definitely real and it always runs out, but we shouldn't fear it so much that we race through our days seeing nothing. Until her 87th year, my nana never stopped seeing. It turns out it's not what you're looking at or even from which vantage point you are looking, but from behind whose eyes you see. I think I've been Alice all along, only I didn't awake under the tree to realise I was lost in Wonderland. I opened my eyes to realise I'd been asleep for so long that I hadn't fathomed I'd found my way into Wonderland and I'd been travelling all along.